I believe in ghosts, but I wish I didn't. And this is because of an experience that happened to me. And ever since it happened, it stuck with me. And I've played it over and over in my head, and I still cannot make sense of what happened. But I think my grandmother delivered a message to me after she passed. This spooky scary storytime submission came from Emily, and to give you context on the story, you need a little bit of background. When Emily was 18, it was also the year her dad left, and this came after years and years of issues with her parents' marriage. They were fighting constantly. Her dad was chronically cheating on her mother, and coincidentally, this was also the same year that Emily came out to her parents. So she was already going through it, and if that wasn't bad enough, the divorce was ugly. It was the kind of divorce that left a lot of emotional trauma and baggage in all areas of the family. And so because of this, she carried a lot of resentment toward her dad, and as a result sort of became distant from his side of the family, including a distance between her and her older half siblings, who are technically her brother and sister, but because they were so much older growing up, they felt more like distant cousins. But her sister and her never really got along as it was, and maybe if they had spent more time together, they would have, but life never really gave them the chance. But around the time this story happened, Emily said that she and her mother had what she calls a working relationship. It wasn't perfect, but it was good. And at the time, her mother was working at this office with a woman who was known around town as the local medium. Though this woman, who we'll call Linda for the story, though Linda worked in the office with Emily's mother, she was also the person around town who, anytime someone from the town wanted to get in contact with someone from the other side, they would go to her. But Emily says, before anyone rolls their eyes, she says that though her mother liked Linda and they had a good co-working relationship, her mother was not the type of person to run around and give personal details about her family or her situation, or especially Emily. So Linda didn't know very much at all about Emily. And she knew even less about what was happening in Emily's life at that particular moment. So anyway, fast forward. It's 2020. Emily is working in healthcare at the start of the pandemic. Her life is already completely turned upside down. And one day, out of the blue, she gets a text from her sister. And that shocked her in itself, like seeing her sister's name pop up, because she hadn't talked to her sister in over 10 years. But her older sister says, "Hey, I know we haven't talked in a long time. I hope this is still your number, but I just wanted to let you know that grandma is in the hospital. She has heart failure. She only has a couple weeks left in case you want to come and see her one last time." This meant that Emily would have to travel out of state to see her grandmother and that side of the family who she hadn't seen in years. And before she could even respond, her older sister texted her again, something that meant more to her than she probably realized. And she said, "I know that it's probably uncomfortable for you to have to see Dad after all of these years. So if you want, I can arrange a time to go with you, and I can make sure that he's not there so you won't have to face him alone." Emily says while this was incredibly thoughtful of her older sister who she hadn't talked to, and it made her emotional, it also brought up the problem because she legitimately did not know what to do. Part of her wanted to see her grandmother, but the other part of her dreaded opening up old wounds. She didn't want to see her father. She didn't want to see estranged family, and she especially didn't want to have to catch up over the passing of a relative. She kept reading the text message over and over, trying to decide what to do, and days passed and she didn't respond. She just kept telling herself that she had more time. But after a couple of days, she received another message from her older sister, and this message was shorter, and she just said that, "I'm sorry to let you know, but Grandma actually passed away. The doctors were wrong. Instead of a few weeks, she only had a few days." Emily said that while she was sad, she also felt relieved because the decision had basically been made for her, and she wouldn't have to travel, and she wouldn't have to face relatives that she hadn't seen in years and reopen old wounds. The whole thing was over, or at least she thought it was. But a few weeks later, her mom called her from work and she was like, "I know this is super weird, but I have a message for you because my coworker is saying that she has a message for you from the other side." Apparently, Linda, her mom's coworker, had approached her mom at work and was like, "Hey, somebody wants me to tell you something. Well, it's actually for Emily, your daughter." She then starts describing the spirit that she's seeing. And she says, "Yeah, it's a woman. She's older. She's very proper. She's well postured. She's buttoned up. She's tight-lipped. She demands respect." And her mom instantly recognized this description as Emily's grandmother. But then the meeting continues. She's like, "I need you to tell her that she wants me to let you know that she died so that Emily wouldn't have to make a decision." That's it. One sentence, a message from a woman who didn't even know that Emily had been agonizing over the decision to go and see her. She said, "When she told me this over the phone, I got chills, not because it felt like something out of a horror movie, but because it felt like something too personal for a stranger to know." Neither the medium nor Emily's mother knew that she had been debating for days about the text messages and that she was trapped in this cycle of like resentment and guilt and fear and still somewhat wanting to go. But yet somehow Linda had delivered this message that went straight into the heart of everything she was feeling. Emily says maybe it was a coincidence, and she kind of hopes that it was because the alternative is actually harder for her to process. The alternative is that her grandmother still found a way to say, it's okay, you don't have to choose. And that possibility means that ghosts are real and that her grandmother still knew her that well after years of no contact. This is Spooky Scary Storytime, the series of allegedly true listener-submitted stories about the creepiest or most unexplained things that they've ever experienced. If you have a story you think no one would believe, please send it in. We would love to hear it.
If you get scared easily, now is the time to scroll because we have another scary story submission and we're talking about skinwalkers again. And the weird part is, I remember looking on my previous video about this same topic and seeing a message from a girl saying that she lived out in Durango, Colorado. And this is a story from another woman who was staying in Durango, Colorado. So let's get into it. The person who sent me the story would like to remain anonymous, and for obvious reasons, I'm going to respect that. For the sake of this video, the woman who sent me the story will be named Emma. So Emma and her boyfriend and 3 kids stayed up in Durango, Colorado at an Airbnb with Emma's best friend and her family. Airbnb was a 2-story home on the river. The way that this Airbnb was laid out is the top floor was an attic space turned living space through renovation, and a majority of the guests stayed on the main floor or the downstairs. What I envision in my head is essentially the second floor being like a loft space. First night, nothing happened. There was absolutely no activity. It wasn't until the second night where things started to happen. This incident occurred when Emma and her boyfriend were trying to enjoy the hot tub, which was located on the deck of the home. As they were both lounging in the hot tub, she sees a flash of white-ish color from the kitchen in the house. She immediately asks her boyfriend if the kids are still up, because she was under the impression that they had all went to bed. Emma's boyfriend gets up from the hot tub, walks over to the back door, goes to investigate what Emma said she saw, and as he's doing so, his back is faced away towards her. As this is happening, Emma hears someone whisper, "Look," in her ear. Does she look? Absolutely not. This experience scared Emma so bad that she actually didn't tell her boyfriend when he eventually came back to the hot tub and said that everything's good, all the kids are sleeping. The second incident of the night happened directly after they were done lounging in the hot tub. Emma and her boyfriend went upstairs to their room, laid down, and as they are both drifting off to sleep, they hear footsteps sprinting down the hallway of the Airbnb. They think it's one of the kids. They wait for a child to show up in their room, and nobody ever shows up. They thought it could have been someone else since they're staying with another family. The crazy part is all of this happened in the same night because they were only booked to stay there for about 2 days. And the third and final incident happened after Emma had fallen asleep and abruptly woke up to hear the creaking of the stairs leading up to the room that they were staying in. She thought that this was probably her youngest son making his way up to the room. And like the last noises that they heard, nobody showed up. However, after a while of waiting for whoever to come up the stairs, Emma hears a child whimpering. And she says it specifically sounds like her best friend's son, who has a very specific, deeper voice. She gets up, leaves the room, calls out to him. No answer. The whimpering stopped. She even turned the light on to see if anyone was down in the main living area, and there was nobody there. The crazy part is, as this is all happening, her friend was actually experiencing something else on the main floor of the home. She had been hearing Emma's children and her children arguing with each other in their room. When she opened the door, everybody was sound asleep. There was nobody arguing. There was nobody even awake. At the end of the email, Emma says that she doesn't really think that this was something that was evil necessarily, but it was mischievous. Anyways, that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for more ghost stories.
The person that sent me this story called it Placed in the Matrix. Actually, it's Placed in the Matrix? ? By the way, if you have a story that you'd like to share with our glitch community about glitches in the Matrix, dreams, aliens, cryptids, or the paranormal, you can send it to this email address. And remember, we believe you. Just so you know, the story might seem like it was written by AI, but I assure you it wasn't. I did use AI to fix any spelling, grammar, or punctuation errors. I'm a 50-year-old man eager to share my story with you. That's okay. We actually have a lot of people that do that. And I want to tell people out here, if you have a story that you want to share and you feel like you're not the best writer, it's like totally an option. Well, first of all, we have in our Discord, by the way, which is this. If you want to come join the Discord, please come hang out with us. We do have a story writing help channel. But also, if you don't want to do that, or if you're overwhelmed by Discord or whatever, you can use like ChatGPT or something to help with your story. Like if you feel like I'm not the best writer, but I want to get my story out there, you can literally just like dictate your story to ChatGPT and be like, can you just write this up nicer for me? And we can do that. It's fine. A lot of people do it. It's totally a cool and acceptable way to send your story. I was born in 1975 in southern Indiana, late May, which meant that it was warm. This story takes place in 1987 when I was 12. 3 years earlier, a single father named Robin and his son, whom I'll call Jay, moved in. We were about the same age, just a week apart in birthdays, and we became very close over the 3 years that we spent together. Robin wasn't very wealthy, so that he couldn't provide many things for Jay. I understood that as we grew up together, we had many sleepovers at my house. He loved spending time with my family and me, my mom, my dad, and my sister. He didn't own pajamas or so many belongings. Still, I had things for him at home, and we celebrated 2 birthdays together. One night, just before my 11th birthday, we had a sleepover where he wanted to show me his birthmark. That's weird. His birthmark looked like a chocolate spot in an unusual shape near his groin, like the emoji. That's really interesting. I was fascinated because I didn't have any birthmarks. It was strange that it was on his groin. As I got to know him better, I eventually understood that he thought of himself as having caused his mom's death. Sometimes Robin blamed Jay for Robin's wife, Jay's mom's death, saying that she died while giving birth to him. That is not his fault. My parents explained that it wasn't his fault, yes, and reassured him about those facts. Then came the week before our 12th birthdays. I was very excited for my 12th birthday because Jay was going to sleep over again. We had such a good time during those 3 years being adventurous in the backyard. Remember, there was no internet or personal computers back then, at least not available to us, though they existed. We spent our time outside making up games, inventing stories, calling ourselves wizards, astronauts, pirates, or other explorers. Our house had a basement, which was a lifesaver since we lived in a tornado zone. If there were ever an emergency, we could head downstairs. During that sleepover, Jay was on the air mattress I kept in my room, normally tucked under the bed when it wasn't in use. We stayed up late, chatting until around 9:30 p.m. My alarm clock, with its clicking plastic flip-down numbers, oh my god, I can literally envision the exact alarm clock you're thinking of, let me know that it was late. We knew we might get in trouble for staying up, but we kept talking. I was again fascinated by Jay's birthmark, and we were going to be 12. For him and me, being 12 was very exciting because it was the last year before becoming teenagers. I remember Jay had sandy blonde hair and extraordinary brown eyes. We even played board games indoors. That night, just before my birthday, the sky turned pink abruptly. I looked at the clock at 9:30 p.m. and saw the sky, not as if it was sunset, but pink. It was very unnatural. My parents were in the other room watching TV. My sister was asleep. Why was the sky pink? Both Jay and I felt nervous, bothered even. I looked again at 9:35 p.m. and the pink sky remained. We lived in a quiet suburb with gravel roads, no streetlights, and no sidewalks. Then there was a sudden knock on the door. Jay and I were both unclothed as it was a warm summer night. Mom opened the door and Dad looked in and said in a calm voice, "Boys, you need to come with us. There's an emergency." What? I thought we'd go to the basement, but Dad said, "Come on, we're going to a shelter." That startled me. We had a basement, so why would we need to go to the shelter when we already had one? Dad touched the back of my neck, giving it a slight pinch. I didn't think much of it, as his hands were very calloused. He called Jay over, and we went outside into the pink night. It was just bright enough from the moonlight to see that the sky was pink. Then we stepped onto a moving walkway, similar to those at big airports, where most of the neighbors were heading. Jay, his dad, Robin, and my dad and his sister and I formed the back of the line. I noticed that where the old house used to be, there was now a tall silo, which was a bit odd since there was a cornfield behind that house, but no silo before. It was huge, so tall I had to lean back to see all the way to the top. We were led to the silo via the moving walkway. What is happening right now? Did you have a moving walkway before this? Or did it just spawn? This is freaking me out, man. What is happening? There I noticed pink pods shaped like beans protruding from it. Dad said it was okay. I wondered if this was the shelter. Mom approached one of the pods, laid my sister inside, and went into an open doorway on the side of the silo. Dad then placed me into a pink pod and went inside as well. I was sitting up and he told me that it was okay to lie down. I looked over at my sister and she was asleep, covered with cables. which struck me as strange. This is all striking me as a very strange. Robin helped Jay into his pod. He was very upset and crying, "No, Dad, I don't want to be here." His dad told him it was okay to lie down. Robin also entered the silo. I looked around and no one else from our street was going in. My sister resting peacefully made me feel calmer. Jay was struggling against the cables, trying to force him to lie down. I decided to lie down myself, though I could see through the pod's side, which looked like slime or goo, pink, of course. Though I saw Jay struggling, I was calm and felt safe, but he clearly did not. He kept trying to get up and out. I called out, "Jay, it's okay, please calm down," just before I fell asleep. Then I woke up in my bed the next morning. The air mattress was out, and I tried to remember why I pulled it from under the bed. I got up, dressed, went to the bathroom, and then to the kitchen. My mom had made my favorite breakfast, pancakes and bacon, and I asked where Jay was. The air mattress was still out. Did he go home? My mom asked, "Who are you talking about?" "We pulled out the air mattress because your cousin is coming today. Eugene is coming for your birthday." I remembered that, and I didn't think much of it, though I was a little confused. "Wasn't the sky pink last night?" I asked Mom. She said she didn't think so. We went to bed right after watching TV. I wondered if there were storm sirens. I remembered the pink sky, but Mom reassured me that everything was fine. The birthday party went on. My 12-year-old cousin and his brothers arrived, and I thought about the strange shape, a chocolate mark in the shape of a winky face. I asked my cousin if he had any birthmarks. He said no, and neither did his brothers. We were close in age and like the brothers, but the details of the birthmark remained unexplained. Many years later, I learned that my friend Mark wanted to see The Matrix, which was released on March 31st, 1999. I was literally thinking about the pods from The Matrix with the cables and the pink goo when you were explaining that before. We watched the trailers and went to see it about a week after it opened. The scene arrives where Neo has been unplugged and is breaking free of the pod. I started breathing heavily because I remembered that pink goo, the cables, the straps. Mark thought I was having a panic attack and tried to calm me. We finished the movie, and afterwards he asked me what caused the panic. I told him about Jay, my missing friend, and his birthmark. Mark then lifted his sleeve to show me a similar birthmark in his armpit, a chocolate shaped precisely as I remembered. He said he first noticed it at age 11. We spent the evening discussing how birthmark could go unnoticed until then and how it was possible to forget a friend's name that only starts with J. During the year after The Matrix came out, I remember asking Robin, Jay's dad, what happened to him. He answered by saying that Jay had died during childbirth, along with Jay's mother/his wife. Robin, however, told me that he would have named his son Josh if Josh had lived. So I know a boy whose name begins with J who never got to be a teenager. Was he just deleted? And this is the best story the Matrix program could come up with? Did Jay struggle so much that he died while floundering in the pod? Or was he actually just a 3-year figment of my imagination? I may never know, and I still find it very strange. How do you remember an unusual placement and shape of a birthmark that no one else in your family has had? And how does someone not notice a birthmark until they are 11 years old? I may never know the answers to these questions. I do not even believe that I have the answers within my own memory, but for now, this is my story. Thank you for taking the time to read it. The end! I don't even know what to say about this. This is freaking crazy, dude. Okay, so you know how people say that like everything that you could literally think of and imagine is something that exists, right? Because you can't think of something that doesn't exist. Does that make sense? I'm talking right now about the similarities between the Matrix and this like scenario that happened to this person way before the Matrix even existed. So maybe like something along the lines of the Matrix like actually did happen in another timeline or another dimension. And maybe you and Jay and all those people, your parents and Jay's dad from that version of reality went into these pods because whatever the fuck was happening there, I can't even tell you, but Matrixy kind of thing was happening there, but you died. And now you're in like a similar timeline. You woke up in a similar timeline in which the mattress is out because your cousin was coming and Jay never existed. And that whole thing. But you retained the memories of the other timeline that just happened and your friend, because that's what's fucking me up, right? Because normally I'd be like, okay, Jay never existed. Jay was a ghost. You were hanging out with Jay's ghost, but that could not have been it because of the memories of you have him sleeping over and the interactions between all the parents and stuff like that. So that can't, and the whole pink sky fucking pod gooey weird pink shit wire situation, Matrix situation is what's fucking me up. So it can't be that. It has to be that. Oh my God, what if you guys got plugged in? What if we're all really, really in the Matrix? Really in the Matrix. And you're plugged in right now and you remember being plugged in. And this is your plugged in Matrix reality. That's actually a simulation, but you're actually still there plugged in. Wait, but what's with the weird birthmark? And why was it like on Jay? Then all your family was like, nah, we don't have it. And then your friend had it, but didn't notice it till he was 11. This is like fucking me up, dude. I don't even know. What do you guys think? Please let me know what you think in the comments. And thank you so much for sharing this story.
If you don't like scary stories or anything paranormal, this is your time to scroll. We have another scary story submission that was sent to me via email. This one also takes place in Moosup, Connecticut. I've been getting a lot of emails about this specific location. Let's get into reading. The email reads, "Hi Casey, I just watched your video about Moosup, Connecticut, and I've not stopped thinking about it. I grew up there, and after hearing your story, I finally worked up the courage to send you mine. Please keep me anonymous, but you can call me Sarah. I've never posted this online because I know exactly what the comments would say. When I was 16, my best friend and I used to drive the back roads around Moosup whenever we couldn't sleep. One October night, we ended up on a narrow road surrounded by woods. It was close to about 2 a.m. Out of nowhere, my friend slammed on the brakes. Standing just off the shoulder of the road was what looked like a woman. She was wearing what looked like a pale nightgown. Her head was tilted almost completely onto her shoulder. She wasn't moving. I remember saying, she probably needs help. My friend grabbed my arm so hard it hurt and said, don't you roll that window down. The second she said that, the woman smiled. Not a normal smile. It stretched so wide, it didn't look natural. We both just froze in fear. Then she slowly lifted one hand and pointed to the trees behind her. My friend threw the car into reverse without taking her eyes off her. We backed up nearly 100 feet before turning around. The entire drive home, neither of us said a word. The next morning, I called her because I honestly thought that we had scared ourselves. To even bring it up, she asked me one question. Did you see what was standing behind her? My stomach dropped. I hadn't. She said just before we backed away, she noticed dark shapes standing between the trees. Not one. She said there were at least 6 or 7, perfectly still, watching us. She didn't tell me that night because she thought that I would panic, and it was already scary enough. A few weeks later, I told my uncle what had happened. He didn't laugh. He got really quiet. Then he asked me exactly where I'd been. When I told him, he pushed his chair back from the table and he said he would never drive that road after midnight again. I asked why. He told me when he was younger, he'd broken down on the same stretch of road, waiting for somebody to pick him up. He heard somebody calling his name from the woods. Not yelling, just speaking normally, like somebody he knew. Problem was, the voice kept getting further and further away. He said it was like whatever was calling him wanted him to follow it. Years later, after my grandmother passed away, we were cleaning out her house, and inside of an old recipe box was a folded piece of paper with her handwriting on it, but it wasn't a recipe. It just said, if something is in the woods and it knows your name before you've spoken, leave. Don't you ever answer it. Never asked where she learned that. I wish I had. I spent years trying to explain what we saw that night. Maybe there is one, maybe there isn't, but neither my friend nor I have ever driven that road again. I know this sounds impossible, but if anyone else from Moosup or anywhere nearby in eastern Connecticut, have you ever heard your name called in the woods when nobody should have been there? Or seen somebody standing beside the road who somehow just didn't feel human? I've wondered for 10 years whether we were the only ones. First off, thank you so much for sharing your story and trusting me to share that on my page. I will tell you, you are not alone because like I said, I've been getting so many messages about Moosup specifically. There's a few different states that have kind of like pinged off of each other in my stories where people from the same area have been emailing me about the same location, and Moosup is definitely one of them. I actually decided to reply to this comment. This person is talking about how the town is very off, so I don't think you're alone in that. Absolutely 100% believe you. And if you're ever feeling crazy, hang on to the fact that you experienced that with your friend. I know that's something that always made me feel better because it's like when you experience something alone, it's easy to be like, oh my God, I'm insane. But when multiple people have the exact same experience, like that happened, it only becomes creepy because you have to try to figure out like what the fuck was that? Any of you watching have any input? If you have any idea of what you think it might be, if you've had a similar experience within the Moose Up area or anywhere at all, go ahead and leave a comment. And if you have a scary story you want to send to me for a chance for me to read it on my page, go ahead and send it to the email listed above. And if you're new here and you want to hear more scary stories, make sure to go ahead and give me a follow. As always, thank you for watching. Love you. Bye.
So one of you guys sent this to me, and it's because they need our advice. Hi Letty, I would love if you would share the story so we can get some opinions, advice, or answers, but I would like to stay anonymous. My cousin told me that she's been seeing owls everywhere she goes. At first she thought nothing of it, but as the sightings progressed, it brought a very strange feeling and it didn't feel right to her. It has been going on for a few months. Our grandfather just passed away last week suddenly and out of nowhere. My cousin and her brother, who she was inseparable with, they shared friend groups, their partners were close, etc., were estranged and in a long time fight and were not speaking for a few months. On the night my grandfather died, they decided to have a long talk to make amends so that they can handle the grief and loss of our grandfather together. My cousin brought up to her brother that she noticed the owls and feels heavy and not right when she sees them. He said, well, I have to tell you something. Sometime before this, he went to a party with friends, got super intoxicated, and wanted a cigarette. No one had one, but the owner of the house said, I have a box here, but it's kind of an offering. It's up to you if you want one. Her brother hesitated at first, but then said, screw it, and took it. Because he was drunk, he said he was insulting the statue and making bad remarks toward it, to the point other partygoers said, okay, that's enough, settle it down. It was a statue of La Santa Muerte. My cousin was so upset and got very scared hearing the story. After the brother and sister talk, they walked back towards our grandfather's house and there was an owl on the roof staring down at them. Is this owl a bad omen? Is this from him cursing La Santa Muerte? What are thoughts and opinions? How can she protect herself? Was my grandfather's sudden unexpected passing due to this? Thank you for your time. I love your videos. Thank you so much. Okay, so in Mexico, seeing an owl is a bad omen, but people also believe that owls are witches. However, I don't think that that is what this situation is. This is just my opinion, okay? I have been reading so many stories, especially of people like taking things from her offering like area. What I would do is probably take a pack of cigarettes back and say sorry because he made fun and he took the cigarette and wouldn't stop. Obviously he was drunk and regrets it, I'm sure. If this happened to me, I'm not like a Santa Muerte devotee, but I would say sorry. I would go back, apologize, because yeah, what the heck. But what do you guys think?
A series of spooky stories except for its woman's intuition. One day in my early 20s, I was out driving around with 3 of my girlfriends. We had gone to the beach, gone shopping, just having a silly day off. I was sitting in the back seat on the right-hand side. A little bit later, all of a sudden, I got a crashing headache and I felt like I was gonna vomit. We were near my house, so I made them drop me off. They were worried about me, but they said that they'd check in later. A few hours later, I get a phone call from my friend who was driving. She just got home from the ER and she kept asking how I knew. I was like, what are you talking about? What happened? Shakily, she starts telling me about how they got into an accident on this twisty, turny highway in our town, ended up rolling the car. Everyone was okay, just cuts and bruises, but the right-hand side backseat roof of the car had completely collapsed when a tree smashed into it. I would have 100% died if I had stayed. I do my absolute best to always follow my gut instinct, and I have always tried to teach my kiddo to do the same. I was driving with my sister and baby to my grandparents' house. A semi-truck behind me started following me closely. I got a bad feeling and started watching him closer. I have depth perception issues, so I constantly clock every vehicle around me to keep up with how much distance I have. He was getting very close to me. If I got over into another lane, he would cut off any cars in that lane to stay behind me. I decided to get off at an exit at the last minute. He had to slam his brakes to get off on the same exit. Unfortunately, there were no stores or gas stations on that exit. He was right up behind me to where I couldn't see his face in the rearview mirror. I turned on my turn signal and angled my car like I was going to turn left at the stop sign. He angled his semi to turn left as well. After making sure that he was angled in a way that would be hard to change quickly, I floored it and went straight across the intersection back onto the interstate. We watched him yelling and screaming in his semi when he realized that he couldn't catch up that easily. I sped a few miles away to the next town and then hid at a gas station for about 30 to 45 minutes so that he would have gone past if he was looking for me. Then we continued to my grandparents' house. My dad insists that I was an imagining thing. Why? What's the fucking reason? But my sister clocked his behavior right after I did and saw everything. He had to drive over the striped median and slam his brakes to get off at that exit with me. There was nothing to the left of that intersection for miles. There have been multiple people go missing on that interstate since. There's multiple exits that lead up to the middle of nowhere. I had just finished 2nd grade, fresh perm, and I wanted to go ride my bike so people could see, as you should. We lived catty corner from a cemetery, so that's naturally where I went to ride. Why would that naturally be where you go to ride? I was a very paranoid kid, so when a white Suburban followed me in, I immediately clocked it and started taking random turns to make sure that they weren't following me, but they followed every time. I went on the little road closest to my house, and I decided to go through the grass straight home. They stopped at that corner and rolled down the window and just watched as I biked home. I've always felt like I was going to get kidnapped, but they also saw where I lived, so maybe not. When I was in my early 20s, I was hanging out with a girlfriend of mine. She gets a call and tells me, hey, let's go hang out with some guys she met a few days ago. We head over to the guy's house and he tells us his friend was on his way. I immediately get bad vibes. We were still standing on the landing because the door we walked in is the side door directly across from the basement. I pretended to be hanging up my coat and hit the light switch, which I assume was/is the basement light. There was a chain with a shackle hanging on the wall right above a mattress with a huge dark stain and a bucket right across from the bottom of the stairs. What the fuck? I immediately told my friend we have to leave, and we got the fuck out of there. When we got back to her place, I explained everything and made sure she blocked the number. Scariest night of my life. We called the police and reported it, but never heard anything more about it. Mine isn't terrifying in terms of abduction, etc., but when I was in my early 20s, I called my job and said that I can't come in. My dad hurt himself and he needs help right now. I had a really bad feeling and I couldn't shake it. Less than an hour later, my dad came home early from work on crutches. He had torn his ACL at work. I've always been quite intuitive since I was a child, and I often predict things like partners cheating, mine and my family members, since I was a kid. When I was 14, I had an uncle that was in the hospital. My mom had went to do a routine visit, but I had decided to stay home that day. I was a quite rebellious teen, so I was in my room trying to pierce my ear with a frozen French fry and a sewing needle. As I was looking at myself in the mirror, a voice in my head said that he's dead. I cried and processed it that night. My mom came back in the morning and broke the news to me. Recently, my cousin and his girlfriend fell pregnant. I was told by my mom and overjoyed. As I was talking with her about how life was going to look and how we were going to have another baby in our family, I snapped out of it and said that something's going to go wrong. My mom told me that I shouldn't say things like that. 3 weeks later, my cousin's girlfriend had a miscarriage. Come back for another episode.
After my car accident, the hospital called a woman I had never met before, and she arrived claiming to be my sister. This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about the woman who apparently was listed as my emergency contact for most of my life. The accident wasn't serious. Another driver ran a red light and hit the passenger side of my car. I had a concussion, a few stitches above my eyebrow, and no memory of the ambulance ride, but when I woke up in the hospital, a woman was sitting beside my bed. She looked relieved when I opened my eyes, and she reached for my hand and said, "There you are." I pulled away. I assumed she was a nurse at first, but she was wearing jeans and a gray sweater. Her coat was folded over the chair beside her. She looked a little older than me, maybe 5 or 6 years. I asked who she was, and her expression changed. Not confusion, but more like disappointment. And then she said, "It's Claire." I told her I didn't know anyone named Claire, and she gave a small laugh and looked toward the door. And then she said, "You always do this after you get hurt." I pressed the call button beside the bed, and Claire stood up immediately. She told me not to panic and said the doctors had warned her that I might be confused because of the concussion. A nurse came in and asked what was happening. I said I didn't know the woman beside my bed, and the nurse looked at Claire and then back at me. She said, "That's your sister." "I don't have a sister. I'm an only child." I told them both that, and Claire started crying. She didn't cover her face or make a scene. Tears just started running down her cheeks while she stared at me. The nurse asked me my name and the date and where I was, and I answered everything correctly. And then she asked if I knew my parents' names, and I gave them. Claire quietly said, "Ask her about the lake." I looked at her and she said, "She'll remember the lake." I had no idea what she was talking about. The nurse asked Claire to wait outside while they examined me. Before she left, Claire leaned toward me and said, "I'll call Mom." I told her not to, and she stopped at the door, and then she said, "She won't answer you." My phone had been damaged in the accident, so the nurse let me use the hospital phone. I called my mother, and she answered immediately. I asked whether I had a sister named Claire, and my mother went silent. And then she asked where I heard that name. I told her there was a woman at the hospital claiming to be my sister, and my mom said, "Do not leave with her." Her voice sounded terrified. I asked who Claire was, and my mother wouldn't answer. She just kept telling me to find a doctor and not let the woman back into the room. And then the line disconnected.
When I tried calling again, it went straight to voicemail. A doctor came in a few minutes later and I explained everything. He checked my chart and said Claire had been contacted because she was listed as my primary emergency contact. I told him that was impossible. My mother had always been my emergency contact. And he turned the computer monitor toward me, and there it was. Claire Bennett. The relationship listed beside her name was sister. Her phone number and address were underneath it, and I had never seen either one. The doctor asked when I had last updated my records, and I said I didn't know. He checked, and Claire's information had been on file since I was 16. That hospital wasn't even in town where I grew up. He said the information had transferred over through my medical records. I told him somebody must have changed it, and he looked through the account history, and there was no recent edit. Claire apparently had been listed on physicals for school, old information forms, and 2 previous hospital visits. I had never noticed. Why would I? Nobody looks at emergency contact printed halfway down a medical form unless something happens. The doctor said it could be a clerical error, and then he asked whether I wanted security to remove her. I said yes. A security guard escorted Claire out, and she didn't resist. As she passed my room, she looked through the doorway and said, "Check your left knee." I froze. When I was 8, I fell from a tree and cut my knee open on a broken branch. The scar was still there. My parents were the only people who knew exactly how it happened. I had always told everyone else it came from falling off my bike because I wasn't supposed to have climbed that tree. Claire had no way of knowing that. I called my mother again, and when she answered, I asked about the lake. My mother started crying, and she told me there had been an accident when I was 6. My parents rented a cabin by a lake for a week. One afternoon, I disappeared. They found me several hours later on the opposite side of the lake. I was barefoot, covered in mud, and holding another little girl's hand. The girl looked older than me, and she told the police her name was Claire. She said she was my sister, and my parents assumed she belonged to another family staying nearby. But nobody reported a missing child. Nobody recognized her. While police were trying to figure out where she came from, my mother took me inside the cabin to clean up. When they came back out, Claire was gone, and they searched the entire area, and they never found her. I asked why my mother had never told me. She said because I had forgotten. After that day, every time somebody mentioned Claire, I became hysterical. I screamed that she was trying to take me back to the lake, and eventually my parents stopped saying her name. Within a few months, I seemed to forget that she had ever existed. I asked why she was in my medical records, and my mother said she didn't know. She had never listed anyone named Claire on anything. And then she told me to check my belongings. The hospital had placed everything from the accident into a plastic bag. My phone and my wallet, and also my keys, and a sweater that had been cut open by paramedics. At the bottom was a photograph. It was old and faded around the edges. 2 girls were standing beside a lake. One was me. I recognized the swimsuit I wore when I was little. The other girl was Claire. She had one arm around my shoulders. On the back, someone had written, "She forgets me every time." The handwriting looked like mine. I asked the nurse whether Claire had put the photograph in my bag, and she said the bag had been sealed by the paramedics before I arrived. Claire had never touched it. My mother drove to the hospital that night, and the moment she saw the photograph, she dropped it. She said it was the same girl from the lake, not similar, but the same person. Claire had not aged more than a few years since I was 6. My mother wanted to take me home with her, but the doctors kept me overnight because of the concussion. She stayed in the chair beside my bed, and sometime after midnight, I woke up and saw someone standing in the doorway. Claire. She put one finger over her lips, and then she pointed toward my mother, who was asleep in the chair. Claire whispered, "She's the reason you keep forgetting." I reached for the call button, but before I could press it, Claire said, "You asked me to come when you got hurt again." I told her I didn't, and she smiled. And then she said, "You always say that too." The hallway light flickered, and for a second I couldn't see her. And when it came back on, the doorway was empty. I woke my mother and told her we were leaving. We signed the discharge papers and left before sunrise. The hospital removed Claire from my emergency contact, and my mother changed every record she could find. I never saw Claire again, but sometimes when I fill out medical forms, her name is already there. Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
Paranormal stories with evidence. So this person works as a security guard for this cancer institution. This picture was actually taken where the Department for Children was in this building. And let me just show you the picture. So one of the security guards noticed this in the TV that was off, and they took a picture of it because it looks like there is a child sitting on one of the chairs. Here is a closer look. I know you didn't ask for a closer look, but I'm trying to see. I feel like it's also just a little sad and not so scary because it's like the cancer building in the children's department, and hopefully it's not a child that passed away there. I don't even know what they do there. Let's look this up. A Children's Cancer Institute diagnoses and treats pediatric cancers, conducts clinical research to find cures, and provides complete family support. These specialized centers focus on unique childhood diseases like leukemia, brain tumor, and solid tumors. That is so sad. I would hope that security guards who work at a cancer center would never joke around about seeing a child ghost and take a picture like this, I feel like. But what do you guys think?
What is going on in Ohio? Now, there have been several Bigfoot sightings that have occurred in the past couple of months. We just seen a UFO sighting, and there was even reports of a strange meteorite last week. Now, Ohio is also famous for something else known as the Grassman. The Grassman is Ohio's version of Bigfoot. It's around 7 to 8 feet tall. It hides in the tall grass. Imagine this hairy creature with grass and sticks in its fur, hiding in the tall grass, and someone walks by and it grabs them and takes them away. Now, there was this man named Randy. Randy lived in eastern Ohio near Akron. And every summer, him and his friends would go to his father's beach house on this private lake. Well, this one summer, Randy and his friends, they go out there, and the first 2 days, they're having a really good time. On the third day, they happen to have this big party, and they got this huge bonfire going out in front of the house. And Randy is out on the dock. And as he's standing on the dock, he notices something about 30 yards away. There's this head sticking out of the water, about up to its nose, and you can see part of its head. It's covered in fur. It's got sticks, grass, and algae covering it. And it looked like this head was just staring at him. The water was moving around it, and it was just in the water. And so Randy sat there for about 15, 20 minutes, and this thing didn't move. So he goes up onto shore, and he starts hanging out with his friends. After about an hour or so, he remembers, like, I wonder if that thing's still in the water. So he walks out to the dock, and when he looks out, about 30 yards out now, there is that head just sticking out of the water. So he's kind of freaked out. He goes back inside with his friends. And after about an hour or so, some of his friends had went to bed. He's in the living room. All of a sudden, his friend comes running out of the room screaming, and he says, I seen this tall, hairy creature covered in grass and green algae, and it was just staring at me through the window. And so instantly, Randy's like, well, I seen this thing out in the water. So they all run outside, they go out to the dock, and there it is, just chilling in the water, about 10 feet from the dock. All of a sudden, this thing comes up out of the water, and it comes up onto the shore, and it chases them. They take off running, they jump in their car, and they get out of there. Well, a couple weeks later, Randy's dad tells him that they had found the maintenance worker in the lake, and he was just floating there, and something had attacked him.
A commercial fisherman says that he accidentally pulled hundreds of human teeth out of the ocean, and what happened after he brought them home made him throw everything back out into the sea. So this story was sent to me by a follower named James, and he's from the West Coast. And before I tell it, there's no way for me to verify whether any of this is true. So as always, take it as entertainment and you can decide for yourselves. Now, James says that this story happened to his uncle, who's a commercial fisherman, and he spent nearly 20 years working out on the water. And according to him, it was the only time that he ever thought about never going back out to the sea ever again after this encounter. So his uncle had been fishing the Pacific for a while, and he pulled up everything that you can possibly imagine. Old anchors, weapons, animal bones, even abandoned safes he's pulled out. But nothing, and I mean nothing, came close to what happened one foggy morning just before sunrise. Now, he had just dropped his trawl net about a mile offshore when it snagged onto something unusually heavy, or it was just giving him some fight. And at first he thought maybe he hooked it onto like an engine block or maybe an old section of a wreckage. And it took nearly 20 minutes to drag whatever this was onto the deck. And instead of any of the obvious, up came this old burlap sack that was rolled out, it like rolled out of the net, and it was tied shut with what looked like rotted rope. Obviously, being curious, he cut it open, as many of us probably would have, and out poured hundreds, maybe even thousands of human teeth that just spilled across the deck. Not dentures, not animal teeth, I mean human teeth. Some still had fillings, other had gold crowns that were attached to them. Some looked decades old, and others looked disturbingly fresh, and he just stood there frozen. And his first thought was that someone had dumped evidence maybe from an old dental office or, but then he noticed something pretty strange. Several of the teeth still had tiny pieces of jawbone attached to it. And that's when his stomach dropped, and he immediately called the Coast Guard, thinking that he just possibly came across some evidence of like a cold case or hundreds of cold cases. And when they arrived, they photographed everything and they collected the teeth, obviously. But because the sack had clearly been underwater for years and there was no obvious indication of where it possibly could have come from, they told him that they'd follow up if necessary. Most likely they would be, to get a statement again later on. But because there was so many teeth that spilled across the deck, some actually slid into spots that were hidden, and James nor the Coast Guard had noticed them. Now, finding them after they had already been gone for quite some time, James decided to hold on to them in case they came back to speak with him, and he was going to give it to them then. Now, that decision would end up haunting him. He couldn't stop thinking about them. Something about the collection felt actually like sickening and wrong to him. And he dumped them into this 5-gallon bucket in his garage when he got home later on that day. And he tried to forget about them, tried to go on with the rest of his day and the rest of his night. Then the noises started. Every single night, just after 1 a.m., he'd hear what sounded like marbles slowly rolling across the concrete floor in his garage. And every time that he grabbed a flashlight and walked into the garage, there was nothing at all, except the bucket, and it somehow had tipped over, and the teeth were scattered across the floor, perfectly spread out, almost as if someone had carefully arranged them. And he blamed the rats or other animals, he blamed gravity, and then convinced himself that he never set the bucket upright in the first place. Until one night, his wife shook him awake, and she whispered to him that she thinks someone was outside. And he looked through the kitchen window, and standing at the end of the dock was a person, standing completely still, facing the water, not the house. They weren't moving, they were just standing there. And he grabbed a flashlight and ran outside, and there was nobody, there was no boat, there was no footprints, no sound, except for one thing. He found a trail of wet footprints leading from the shoreline straight into his garage. And the garage door was already open, and inside the bucket was empty. Every single tooth that he'd thrown in there was now gone. The next morning, he searched everywhere for them, thinking that maybe he moved them or his wife, but there was nothing. And later that afternoon, he loaded the empty burlap sack into his boat without really knowing why. He was kind of doing it like robotically, almost like a spell on him. He returned to the exact coordinates where he found them, and he tied a weight to the sack and dropped it overboard. And the moment that it disappeared beneath the surface, the water, he said, it was like so still. There was no wind, no waves, nothing. The silence lasted almost a full minute. And then something bumped the bottom of his boat. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. And it was slow and very deliberate. Like definitely wasn't an accident. Like someone was knocking from underneath. And he started the engine and never looked back. And according to James, his uncle sold that boat less than a month later, and he never fished that area again. And maybe some things do belong at the bottom of the ocean. and they're maybe never meant to be found. So what do you think? Would you have opened the sack or thrown it back the second that you realized that there was human teeth inside? Let me know what you guys think in the comments.
The person that sent me the story called it attacked by a hellhound. I'm so excited that someone got attacked by a hellhound. I just love reading your stories, guys. By the way, if you have a story that you'd like to share with our glitch community about glitches in the Matrix, dreams, aliens, cryptids, or the paranormal, you can send it to this email address. And remember, we believe you. Hi, Jessica. Hi. I'm addicted to your channel. It's really awesome and helps to make me sound less of a freak. You are not a freak. Well, you are a freak, but it's cool to be a freak. I'm all the way from South Africa, and I hope you'll enjoy my little tale. Here goes. I was attacked by a hellhound. This happened in 1985. I was 18 years old, and spiritual things was something that I grew up with, but first, a little history. My dad was a seer, and I inherited a smidge of his gift. I often see shadow people or spirits and even demonic entities. Since childhood, I could hear voices and could intuitively know when I entered a haunted place. I could also foresee when people would pass and read auras. I can see angels around us, but they do not look like one would expect. They have no wings, and they are incredibly tall and wear white robes with colored sashes. I often have prophetic dreams and finally started to write them down a few years back. I believe that all things, people and animals, leave psychic residue in places. The walls resonate with the psychic energy and causes hauntings. I may be wrong, but that's what I believe. Back to 1985. It was a terrible year. We lost my brother's 3-year-old daughter in a car crash. We were very close. I'm so sorry. She was the light of my life and looked exactly like me. In my family, I was known as the changeling. I did not look like anybody. My whole family is dark-haired with olive skin and dark eyes. Me, blonde and blue-eyed. When Liz, I don't know if that's I-L-Z-E or I-I-Z-E or L-L-Z-E. That was her name, but it's a cool name. I'm sorry if I pronounced it wrong. Came along. She was my mirror image. Finally, I felt like I actually belong. Losing her in such a terrible way felt like someone ripped my heart out of my chest. The night after the funeral, I was staying at my sister's house. We went to bed around 10 o'clock or 10:30. I fell asleep, exhausted by the pain of losing my mini-me. It must have been around 2 or 3 a.m. when I woke up. I laid there for a bit, and I heard something coming into the room. It sounded exactly like Liz dragging her beloved blankie and sucking her pacifier. I knew it was her and that she wanted to say goodbye. I was so scared. She was horribly maimed in the accident, and I didn't want to see her like that. I closed my eyes, and then, suddenly, I felt pressure on my shoulders and hot breath in my face. I opened my eyes to this huge black dog with red eyes. He pinned me to the bed, slobbering all over my face. I couldn't move or even cry out for my sister to come help me. All I could do was make gurgling sounds, hoping that someone would hear. Fortunately, my sister did hear and came rushing into the room. As soon as she turned on the light, the dog was gone. All I could say was that it looked like you would imagine the black dog of the Moors in Scotland would look, or even Sherlock Holmes's dog in The Hound of the Bakersfills. I still don't understand what the connection was between an innocent child's spirit and the evil I felt from the dog. I also couldn't explain the wet slobber all over my face. Perhaps because I was going through such an emotional experience, I was vulnerable, and the hellhound tried to get a stronghold in my mind. In later years, I'm 59 now, my gift of second sight grew. I usually don't share my experiences with others. It's just my husband that I trust with my stories. The end. Well, thank you for trusting us with your story. I really appreciate it. It makes me feel really good. First of all, I want to apologize because I'm absolutely butchering this person's name. I can't tell if it's I-L-Z-E or L-L-Z-E or I-I-Z-E, so I'm so sorry that I know I'm pronouncing it wrong. Second of all, I kind of want to say that I don't think that that was her coming to say goodbye. I feel like potentially maybe because like you said, you were in a really bad emotional place. Something evil was coming for you. And I feel like a lot of times things that are evil will disguise themselves as things that people that you know or something that you will let in. Even though you didn't really let her in, you were very, very scared, which makes a lot of sense. I would also be very, very scared. And I'm not saying that she wouldn't come to say goodbye to you, because that's 100,000% something that happens all the time, that our loved ones come and say goodbye to us after they pass. But the reason that I'm like, I don't really think it was her is because it was so close. Like literally, like you felt her coming, saw her coming, heard her coming, freaked out, was scared. And then immediately after there was like the hellhound thing on you. There's also something called a black dog, but now that I'm looking this up, just like make sure that I was right, the black dog can actually just be a hellhound. It says the black dog is a supernatural, spectral, or demonic hellhound. Why you had a hellhound on you, I have no idea, and that is fucking terrifying. I'm assuming that's the only time that that has happened. Does anybody else know like why that would happen? Either way, that's fucking so scary. I'm so sorry that you experienced that. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Let me know what you guys think in the comments.
Snacks in hand, the vibe is set, and once I start, you won't forget. Don't eat too much, because you gotta stay fine. Come on, bestie is? Yes, it is. Hi, bestie boy. I missed you so much. You know it's time for a snack, right? And if you're not gonna have a snack, go ahead and get your essentials, your gardening essentials. Period. Let's go right into the story. For the sake of the story, let's call him Cadence. I don't know. Cadence has a kid with a girl. Let's call her Jasmine. Now, they are not together. However, they were together, had a kid, didn't work out. You know, the usual. But the reason why they really didn't work out is because his girl had cheated on him. It's not like he wanted to break up his family. That's not what he wanted. He wished he could have his family together. However, he found out that his girl was cheating. He left. She said she was going to change. He came back, tried to stay, tried to make his family work. But she cheated again. So he was just like, I need to have self-worth. So he left. Now, Jasmine is devastated. Yeah, she cheated, but she still want her man. She still want her family. But Cadence is not trying to hear none of that, because if you cared about your family, you would have never cheated. Jasmine swears that she realized her mistakes and she wants her man back. She wants her family back. She will never, ever cheat again. But again, he not trying to hear none of that. So Jasmine gets desperate. Jasmine decides she's gonna do a spell to get her man back. And y'all know how this shit goes. Jasmine was never a God believer. However, she does believe in like spells and stuff like that, which kind of contradicts itself, but okay. Anyway, she always kind of like practiced and dibbled and dabbled and stuff like that. And Cadence knew, but he just didn't know like the point where she would go with that. Anyway, so one of the days that she went to go pick up, the baby from Cadence, she did what she had to do and she kisses Cadence. Now, don't get me wrong, Cadence still loves her. He still wants to work shit out with her, but he's like, bro, you cheated on me twice. He still loves that girl down. So like, when she kissed him, he didn't pull away. But after the kiss, he was kind of like, bro, you need to stop doing that for real. Like, we're not getting back together. You don't know how to get your shit together. You don't know how to stay out of these niggas' faces. So I don't need to be with you. Little did he know that kiss was a trap. It was a trap. So she kisses him, she gets the kid, she leaves. She just now has to wait. So boom, a week goes past. Within that week, Cadence finds himself wanting to go over to her house, wanting to work things out, missing her touch, her kisses, everything. But he's fighting it. He's fighting it real bad because he's like, bro, I can't. So after that week goes past, she starts to show up in his dreams. Like every night he goes to sleep, she's in his dreams. And it's like, it's them and their family and them being married. Everything he ever wanted out of this girl, it's what he's dreaming about. And so while this is happening, like, Cadence finds himself literally crying every day. Because if you know, like, cheating actually really, people be acting like cheating is just so normalized, but that shit really fucks somebody up, whether you're a man or a woman. Especially for a man. Like, he was broken down. He's, like, crying every day and everything like that. And low-key, Jasmine is, like, calling him every day to check up on him, saying that, I'm here for you. I know I did. Sweet talking him. She even, like, tries to invite him over, but he's saying, no, he's trying really hard to fight it. And so one day he decides, he's like, bro, like, this is my family. I feel bad for my daughter. Like, I can't raise my daughter in a broken home. So I'm going to go over there and I'm going to talk to her to get some kind of closure. So as he's getting ready to talk to her, he gets a call from his girl best friend. And when he picks up the call, the first thing she says to him is, do not go over to your baby mother's house. He's like, how the fuck did you know I was going to go over to my baby mother's house? But at the same time, he wasn't very surprised because his girl best friends, she is like very gifted. So this is not the first time like she's called him saying, hey, please be careful today. Please don't do this today. So he like, how the fuck did you know I was about to go over there? What happened? What kind of dream you had? So she basically tells him like, yo, that bitch is doing voodoo on you, bro. That bitch is doing spells on you. He's like, what? What are you talking about? And his girl best friend basically tells him that the night prior, she had a dream. She had a dream that he was married to said baby mother and had his family and stuff like that, right? And then when she went to visit him and the baby and stuff, when she got to the house, everything seemed like they were happy. But for some reason, his hands were tied up in front of him. Even though they were acting like everything was normal, like he was talking to her and everything, he's talking to her with his hand tied in front of him. And like if they're moving, the baby moms would grab him by the tie and just pull him like, hey baby, come sit down. Hey baby, come help me with this. Hey baby, come help me with that. So as soon as the best friend woke up, the best friend is like, oh shit, because she know about this shit, right? The best friend is like, yeah, that bitch is doing voodoo on you, bro. And the best friend also knew that she dabbled and stuff like that. So you already know, if you know people that dibble and dabble stuff like that, you can't put nothing past nobody. So the best friend is like, instead of going to her house, come to my house right now, right freaking now. And if you don't come, I will come and get you. Come to my house right now and I'm gonna do a spiritual bath. And she starts asking him questions. And she's like, have you been to her house within the past week? He's like, no, the last time I seen her was when she came, to come get the kid and she kissed me. The best friend is like, oh, and how have you been feeling after that kiss? He's like, well, I have been thinking about her like a lot more. Like, I ain't gonna lie, I've been like really depressed. Like, I've been crying about it and stuff because I feel like I need to work my family out. And the best friend is like, yes, that's natural. However, don't you think it's kind of weird how you were standing on business and all of a sudden it's like you were craving her? He's like, yeah. He's like, all right, I'm coming over. So Cadence goes over to the best friend's house. The best friend does a nice spiritual bath for him, prays over him, all that good stuff. And the best friend is like, you're staying over here for the next 3 days because he wasn't getting the kid within the next 3 days. So she's like, you're staying here for the next 3 days because I need to watch over you. I need to make sure you're not going over there to that bitch because she's gonna cheat on you again. So he goes over there. She does the spiritual bath for him. That same night, after she does the spiritual bath, Cadence is throwing up repeatedly. Like the entire night, he cannot stop throwing up. And he's telling his best friend, like, please take me to the hospital. I think I might have caught a stomach virus or something like that. And the best friend is like, I really don't think the hospital's gonna do anything because this is very much spiritual. Like, you're throwing up all this shit that she tried to put on you. The best friend is like, the only reason why you already didn't fall for it is because I'm in your life. Like, and I know about this stuff. So in a way, you're kind of protected. Also, you are protected, Cadence is like, I really don't think this has anything to do. Like, I feel this shit. I've never been this sick before. Like, I am throwing up and I can't stop throwing up. I have nothing left in my tummy anymore. Please take me to the hospital. So the best friend is like, okay, if that's what you think is going to make you feel better, I will take you to the hospital. But I'm telling you, this has nothing to do anything medical. So she takes him to the hospital that same night. He goes to the hospital. They do tests. They do a whole bunch of stuff, but they can't. Like, he has no virus. It don't seem like he has anything. The doctors can't really find anything wrong with him. And she's sitting there looking at him like, I told you. But here's the kicker. At 5 sharp in the morning, he stops. He stops throwing up. Not only did he stop throwing up, he's feeling like he's never felt before. He's feeling great. He's feeling amazing. At that point, he was already about to get discharged. But when the doctors saw how, like, the switch happened so quick, they were definitely like, okay, yeah, you need to go because you ain't nothing wrong with you. But here's the bigger kicker. Not only is he feeling better, it's like he threw up all the leftover feelings he had for her. He feels nothing for her. 30 minutes later, Jasmine starts calling him, and I mean blowing up his phone. She's calling him like, I had a really bad dream about you. Like, are you okay? He's like, yeah, I had a quick stomach bug. I'm at the hospital. Is the baby okay? She's like, yeah. She's like, I need to see you. I need to see you right now. I need to talk to you. Was at the hospital. I need to see you. He's like, nah, I'm good. Actually, the doctor said I'm fine. Like, I'm cool. I don't need you to see me. And she starts on the phone like crying, please, I need to see you. I need to see you. And this started a whole thing to where she became insanely obsessed with him for the next year, to the point where he had to get full custody of his daughter and get a restraining order from her. So the spell that she was trying to do completely backfired on her. But yeah, that's the story, y'all. Don't forget to go over to my YouTube channel and watch my story times in long form, and don't watch nobody else's because they're making money off of me. And don't forget to get my ebook. The link is in the bio so you can learn how to do a spiritual bath, okay? I be trying to tell y'all about these things, but y'all don't want to listen. Anyway, don't forget to let me know what you were eating, okay? I love you. Bye.
I
I took a picture of my daughters playing on the swings in our yard. Our house can be seen in the background, and I noticed something in the window of my bedroom. About 3 years ago, I took this photo of myself along with a few others. That day, I remember perfectly well that it was my birthday and I was at home alone. I never noticed anything strange about it until I added it to WhatsApp and my friend told me there was something behind me. These two photos were taken simultaneously on my fiance's iPhone. They were taken at the Andrew Lowe house in one of the nurseries. There's a porcelain doll that can be seen in the background of both photos, but her expression seems to change. One time, my sister and I went to her ex's house so that she could pick up a few things. I waited in the car for her, listening to music. As I was sitting there, I remember starting to feel cold and like somebody was watching me. I looked out the window and there was, in fact, someone watching me. Immediately, I could tell it wasn't human. I sent a photo to my sister, and almost immediately after, she came back out to the car and we left.
The Man in the Fields ritual, another favorite. I love this one. If the ritual is completed successfully, it's said to provide 1 year of protection. And how it works, I'll explain more about how you do the ritual, but there are 3 different times that you can start the ritual. You can go from 9 until midnight, 10 until midnight, or 11 until midnight. If you do 9 until midnight, you get physical safety for a year. So no sicknesses, no stubbing your toe, no hurting yourself. If you start at 10 and you do the ritual within 2 hours, you not only get physical safety for a year, but you also get financial safety for a year. If you start the ritual at 11 and finish it within 1 hour, you'll have no negative consequences for a whole year.
Mad cool. Robbing a bank.
Only one person can do this ritual. It needs to be done in a house, and extra points if it's in the countryside, and extra points if there's a crop field.
My house would be perfect for this.
Yeah. No one else can be in the house. No people, no pets. A candle or another non-electric light source is required, like an oil lamp.
I lit one of those in a closed shed one time and I almost passed out.
What an idiot. Jesus Christ. Don't do that, you guys.
It's not good.
According to the legend, flashlights, cell phones, and other electronic lights won't work, and they'll only flicker in and out for a few seconds. You'll also need a crucifix, which we know means bad news bears, a clock, or a watch. You have to have one room that has, I would say, a bed in it and only one door. This is going to be your safe room. It's best if you pick a room that has like a minimal amount of stuff in it, because that's going to be the first room you're closing everything in. That's your safe room. You do not want to leave anything open in that room. So setting up the ritual, aka inviting in the man in the fields. So you wait until after sunset and make sure no one else is around. Okay. According to the legend, the entity will not appear if anyone besides the summoner is there anyways. The earliest you can begin is 9 p.m. Light your candle, go into your backyard with your candle and your crucifix. Face your house and whisper 7 times, but who will scare the crows away? On the 7th whisper, you are supposed to hear a voice behind you say, "That's not your biggest problem."
Okay. So random.
Yes, I feel like it's really random.
Very weird.
You're not supposed to look behind you if you hear the voice, and you're supposed to go back into your house immediately, close the door behind you, and you're starting the ritual. If you didn't hear the voice say, "But who will scare the crows away?" the ritual didn't work. Allegedly, though, it doesn't matter if you actually physically hear it. You might just hear it in your head. So for OCD people, don't even bother trying this, because you're going to be
there's no way.
It's a bad news bears. Performing the ritual. Okay, so once you get back inside, the ritual officially starts. And now you have to close absolutely everything in your house that can be. And everything will be now opened. Okay, so if it was closed before, it doesn't matter. Now it's going to be opened. Before you start closing things, take your crucifix into a room that only has one door. This is your safe room, and it's also where you should be sleeping for the night. So this is your safe room. If things go wrong, leave the crucifix in there and shut the door. So when I say you have to make sure everything is closed, I mean doors, cupboards, drawers, containers, Tupperware, travel mugs,
water bottle lids,
boxes, movie cases, if you have those anymore. Everything needs to be closed by midnight, and you need to also be by midnight laying in bed with your mouth and eyes closed, okay?
Because they open.
It counts. It's not hard to close something, but it's remembering every single thing in your house that you have to close. And also people are always like, I don't even know if I have all the lids for my Tupperware. Like, come on, that's a disaster.
You have to like go through that days in advance. If you even can. I don't know. That could be cheating.
Yeah, he might view that as cheating.
He might not like that.
If you miss even one, it's considered that you failed the ritual. As you move through the house closing things, you might start catching a glimpse of a man in old farmer's clothes out of the corner of your eye. He has ash gray skin. He's known as the Ashen Man. You're not supposed to look directly at him, and you're not supposed to make eye contact with him. The good news is that he's not the man in the field, so he's not out to get you.
He's like the referee.
Yeah, he's observing. You're not supposed to worry about him for some reason, but he's going to follow you around the house. So
make sure you're not cheating.
So creepy. So creepy. Whatever you do throughout this ritual, do not look in your backyard. And that is essential because in the backyard is a scarecrow-like figure. There are different versions of this ritual. Some say the scarecrow has no head, and others say it has a cow skull head, which is really creepy. Its arms and legs are impossibly long
It's the
limbs.
worst part for me.
Its skin is pale. The story says that if you fail the ritual or don't make it back to your safe room in time, the scarecrow will come for you and decapitate you. So this is also why you're warned not to look outside, because if you do look at the scarecrow like figure, it will see you and it will start climbing down from its post and coming for you. And you then have 1 minute to get into your safe room before it comes and decapitates you. You might hear things when you're in that room. You might hear scratching at your door. You might hear growling. You might hear your aunt suddenly in your house being like, hey, Jess,
come on out.
Come on out.
All is fine out here.
Yeah, I brought you a present. The present is the
decapitation.
Decapitating you. Yeah.
Straight to decapitation station. A one-way ticket.
One-way ticket to decapitation station. Do not open the door no matter what you hear, okay? If you left anything open in that safe room,
you're fucked.
The scarecrow's coming in through the opening. So, and I just want to reiterate, okay? This scarecrow, though, he's gonna try and get into the room, okay?
Yeah.
This entity, he is going to be pounding at the door. He is going to be making terrifying sounds. Maybe he's going to be making nice sounds. Maybe he's going to make you promises. Like, if you open the door, I promise I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that.
Don't. He wants your head.
Yeah.
And he will do and say whatever he can to get it.
Exactly. But if you closed everything within your 3, 2, 1 hour, whatever you chose, you go to sleep, you close your eyes, you close your mouth, you sleep until the sun rises around 6 a.m. You wake up, you're good. Hopefully you now have 1 year of protection of some kind. So this one definitely has a good reward, I would say.
Yeah.
Imagine getting a text from a random number asking if you're who you are with your address attached to it, and then later on having a miscarriage. What's up, cousins? So I'm back with another story time. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the previous stories that I already posted, but just like any other time, let's not waste no time and let's get into it. For this story, we're going to call her Kimmy. So this takes place last year in 2025 between November and December. So her ex-fiance, Trey, ended up calling her, telling her like, hey, if a girl named Dee Dee reaches out to you, ignore her. So she immediately felt uneasy, wondering, why would this girl even know anything about me when I don't even know her? Trey was like, oh, she was lurking on my page and she just saw pictures of us together. Kim said she knew that was some BS because he never posted him or them on his page throughout the 6 years that they was together. Kim was like, nah, you had to tell this girl something because she don't know about me, she don't know me, and she don't even know of me. Then Trey says, I'ma call you back. 6 minutes go by, Kim get a random text asking, is this Kim and do you live at the full address? So Kim like, what the fuck? Who is this? And how do you know where I live at? Kim puts 2 and 2 together and realizes this is the girl Dee Dee. So the girl Dee Dee says, well, I do black magic. He talks about you all the time and tells me everything. Leave my man alone. Kim was like, honey, I don't want your man. I got my own man. And why you want a man that's still bringing up his ex? Dee Dee said, well, and I'm doing black magic on you. Kim says, well, I don't care because I'm protected by God. Dee Dee then said that she was doing black magic on Trey throughout the 2 months that they already have been together. So they go back and forth with each other for about an hour. After the phone call hangs up, Kim said that some random stuff about Dee Dee started popping up and she ended up finding out that Dee Dee does black magic on every person that she's with. So fast forward to December 25th, Kim ended up having a dream about her ex-fiance that he got into a really bad car accident. The car ended up being flipped over multiple times and he had to be rushed to the hospital. So the next day, when Kim wakes up, she got a phone call from her ex-fiance mom asking her, did she have anything to do with Trey's car accident? Kim was confused, like, no, I was at home. So his mom know about the new girlfriend, Dee Dee, but she doesn't know she does black magic. So Trey's mom lives in LA. Trey and Dee Dee and Kim all live in Milwaukee. So his mom asked, could Kim go check on him and see if he's okay in the hospital? Kim said she had a really eerie feeling about this and she really did not want to do it. Although she wanted to see him and make sure that he was okay, something just told her to not go near him. Trey ended up getting in contact with Kim from the hospital. Now, when Kim answered her phone, Trey ended up telling her that Dee Dee told him that Kim was next. Kim saw all of a sudden the phone went silent and it was just static and then it hung up. She said immediately after that phone call, she started praying and also cleansing herself. Now, fast forward to January this year, Kim said she started feeling really, really bad. She couldn't keep anything down. She couldn't sleep. And when she was throwing up, it was black. Now, at this time, the guy she was currently dating, they had been dating for 2 years, and she just found out that she was 3 months pregnant. Sometime after, Trey ended up getting back in contact with Kim and telling him that Dee Dee tried to unalive herself and that she ended up running in front of a car, but she only suffered a broken leg and cracked ribs. Kim told him to leave me alone and stay far away from me. That same night, Trey got arrested, and to this day, he's still in jail. Shortly after, Kim had a miscarriage and lost her baby. When she went to the doctors, they couldn't tell her a reason on what caused the miscarriage or what even happened. But deep in Kim's soul, she feels like Dee Dee was the reason to why she lost her baby. Kim is now going through surgery to see if it was something within her body to make her have a miscarriage, but she's still dealing with this to this day. So again, y'all, if you have any spooky stories that you want to tell me, it doesn't have to be just spooky. If you got some juicy tea, you better tell me, okay? Make sure you guys DM it to me or email it to the email that's in my bio. Until the next story time, like any other story time, make sure you guys like, comment, repost, and share this one. And I will see you guys later.
On a July morning in 1209, Catholic crusaders breached the walls of a heretic sanctuary city in the south of France, ready to raze the place to the ground. But the city was made up of as many good Catholics as heretics. So how were they to tell the good Christians from the bad? The order the Crusaders were given remains one of the most chilling exhortations in medieval history. Kill them all. God will know his own. The ensuing slaughter became known as the Massacre at Béziers, in which some 20,000 men, women, and children were put to the sword by their fellow Christians. Béziers was the beginning, the horrifying opening act of the Albigensian Crusade. What followed over the next 20 years would fundamentally remake an entire region of Europe. To understand why the Albigensian Crusade happened and why the region it destroyed has never quite recovered, you have to understand what the Languedoc actually was in the late 12th and early 13th centuries. The southern French territories that we now call the Languedoc were not in the High Middle Ages meaningfully French in any way we would understand the term. They spoke a distinct language, Occitan, which was closer in some ways to Catalan than to the langue d'oil spoken in northern France. They had their own literary tradition, the troubadour poetry that would influence European lyric verse for centuries. They had their own aristocratic culture, legal traditions, their own political networks. And by the 12th century, they had become one of the most heretical regions in Christian Europe. Catholicism had spread through the Languedoc gradually, arriving from the east in the 11th century and taking root among a population that found its dualist theology, that is, the belief that the material world was the creation of an evil god and the only spiritual world came from the true God, more compelling than the increasingly institutional Catholicism of the Roman Church. By the late 12th century, Catholicism was no longer a fringe movement in the Languedoc. It was, in some regions, the majority religion. This is the detail that most casual accounts of the Cathars get wrong. Catholicism was not a scattered underground network of persecuted mystics. It was a functional public religion. Cathar Perfecti, the high-level initiates and leaders of the movement, who lived by strict ascetic rules and served as spiritual guides, operated openly amongst the population of southern France. They were protected by local aristocratic families, some of whom were themselves converts to Catharism. In cities like Toulouse and Béziers and Carcassonne, being Cathar was not a shameful secret. It was a religious identity that actually carried social respectability. It wasn't until the second half of the 12th century that the Roman Catholic Church seemed to finally realize that it had effectively lost an entire region of Christendom to a branch of Christianity it deemed dangerously heretical. The Church's initial response was diplomatic. Papal legates were sent to the region, debates were arranged, preaching missions were mounted, all aimed at converting the errant heretics back into the fold. None of it worked. The Cathars were too well established and too popular, widely regarded as more spiritually pure and less materially corrupt than the local Orthodox clergy. In 1208, one of those papal legates was assassinated in the Languedoc. The murder gave Pope Innocent III the political justification he had been looking for. He called a crusade. Deriving its name from the town of Albi, one of the centers of Catharism, the Albigensian Crusade was fought in two main phases across a roughly 20-year period from 1209 to 1229. It was joined by northern French nobility eager for land, by papal legates eager for orthodox conformity, and eventually by the French crown itself, which recognized the campaign as an opportunity to extend its political control southward. What the crusade did in the Languedoc across those 20 years was more than religious persecution. It was systematic cultural eradication. The first target of the crusade was the Cathar stronghold of Carcassonne. But on their way there, the Catholic army stopped at Béziers, another well-known sanctuary for the Cathars. On July 22nd, 1209, following a short siege, the Crusaders breached the walls of Béziers and prepared to attack the city. But there was a specific practical problem before them. Despite its robust Cathar population, Béziers was also home to just as many, if not more, Orthodox Catholics, albeit those who had defied the church by refusing to hand over their Cathar neighbors. The Crusaders were not theologians. They could not, especially in the chaos of a sack, reliably distinguish which residents were which. Prior to the attack, the problem was put directly to Arnaud Amalric, the Cistercian abbot serving as the papal legate to the crusade. In other words, the man responsible for the spiritual direction of the entire military campaign. What were the Crusaders to do about the Catholics who were mixed in with the heretics? According to tradition, Arnaud Amalric's response was, Cedite ios, novit enium, dominos qui sunt ios. Kill them all. God will know his own. Béziers set the pattern. Cities were sacked. Populations were massacred with little to no distinction between Cathars and Orthodox Catholics. Cathar perfecti who refused to renounce their faith were burned in mass executions, sometimes in numbers of over 100 at a time. But perhaps an even more significant part of the story is what happened after the direct military campaigns. The Treaty of Paris in 1229 ended the formal crusade and transferred political control of most of the Languedoc to the French crown. What followed was decades of administrative and cultural imposition. Northern French nobility replaced local aristocratic families whose lands had been confiscated. The Inquisition, the institution founded specifically to root out the remnants of Cathar belief, became a permanent feature of regional life for over a century. The Occitan language was slowly displaced from official use. The langue d'oil, the French of the North, became the administrative language of the region. The troubadour tradition, which had flourished in the courts of the Cathar sympathetic aristocracy, effectively ended within a generation. The regional political networks were dismantled. The Cathar theology itself was, by the 14th century, essentially extinct as a lived tradition. What had been, in the year 1200, a distinct European regional culture with its own language, literature, religion, and political identity was, by the year 1300, administratively French, linguistically and religiously homogenized. The crusade did not just destroy the Cathars. It absorbed the Languedoc, transforming it into a hauntological landscape. Coined by the French philosopher Jacques Derrida and developed by later cultural theorists like Mark Fisher, the concept of hauntology refers to places, cultural artifacts, and experiences that carry the traces of past that stubbornly persist, or of unfulfilled futures that never came to be. A landscape that can be described as hauntological, for instance, is one where a specific historical wound continues to shape the perceived experience of the present, not just as commemoration, but as ongoing presence in and of the landscape itself. Cathar country is, I would argue, one of the most powerful examples of a hauntological landscape in Europe. What happened in this region was not just a single massacre or a war or an atrocity. It was a systematic cultural overwriting. And unlike destruction, overwriting leaves traces, both of itself as a process and of the older text it sought to obscure. The metaphorical text of the past that was overwritten is still there, faintly, just under the surface of the new. Present enough to be felt, but absent enough that its presence takes the form of a haunting rather than overt continuity. You can feel this if you travel through the region today. The great Cathar castles, Peyroux-Patous, Caribous, Puy-Laurent, Puy-Vert, are not mostly Cathar buildings. They are post-conquest Royal French fortresses, built or extensively rebuilt in the decades after the Crusade, specifically to enforce northern control over the region. The castles are, in a very real, literal sense, the physical apparatus of the conquest. They sit on mountain ridges throughout former Cathar country, dominating the landscape, visible from villages, functioning even in ruin as sustained architectural statements of who won and who was overwritten. But the villages beneath them still bear Occitan names. Occitan is still spoken by a minority of the regional population, approximately 600,000 speakers, mostly older, mostly rural. And there has been a sustained cultural revival movement since the 1970s working to preserve the language and its literary traditions. Regional identity in the Languedoc remains distinct from French national identity in specific ways that Parisian bureaucrats have never entirely been able to grasp. And the memory of what happened remains, not as active grievance or political mobilization, more as atmosphere, as a specific quality of the landscape that is felt rather than formally codified. Consider the village of Minerve, for instance. Minerve is a small, extraordinarily beautiful medieval village built on a rocky outcrop between two river gorges. Approximately 100, maybe 120 people live there today. It's the capital and namesake of the Minervois wine region, a tourist destination in the summer, popular with hikers and wine enthusiasts alike. It is also the site of one of the earliest atrocities of the Albigensian Crusade. In the summer of 1210, 1 year after the massacre at Béziers, the Crusader army under Simon de Montfort besieged Minerve, which had been sheltering approximately 140 Cathar perfecti. The siege lasted 6 weeks, during which 3 massive trebuchets rained terror on the town, while a 4th targeted the well that functioned as the population's sole source of water. With its only water supply cut off, Minerve at last surrendered in late July. The perfecti were given the choice to renounce their faith. They refused. On July 22nd, 1210, 1 year to the day after Béziers, 140 Cathars walked into a large fire at the base of the village and were burned alive. It was, up to that point, the largest mass execution of religious dissidents in medieval European history, at least until the mass burning at Montségur 34 years later. There is a monument at the site today, a simple stone that reads in Occitan, Aux Cathars, martyrs de pur amour chrétien, to the Cathars, martyrs of pure Christian love. The monument was erected in 1982, over 700 years after the event it commemorates. 700 years, and the region still felt the need to mark what had happened, in the language of the people who had been overwritten, using a theological vocabulary the Roman Church would surely have rejected. That is what a hauntological landscape looks like. A region that has been clinging to the obscured text of their half-buried, overwritten past for centuries, refusing, quietly, to let the story end where the Crusade sought to end it. There's something specific that makes the landscape scarred by the Albigensian Crusade different from other places associated with historical violence. A great deal of European history took place on sites which we can now visit today. Battles, massacres, sieges, executions. Most of these sites have been thoroughly processed by their surrounding cultures, commemorated, memorialized, absorbed into the national narrative in ways that give the visitor a specific role to play. You can go to Waterloo, or Verdun, or Normandy, and the story you're being told is a story your own culture has approved in a way. Cathar country is different. Here, the story the landscape is telling has not been approved by any of the major cultures that currently claim the land. The French national narrative treats the Albigensian Crusade as an awkward historical episode that produced the political unification of France. The Roman Catholic Church has not, to my knowledge, formally apologized for the Crusade. The specific Cathar theological perspective is not represented by any surviving religious institution. What remains is the landscape itself and the people who continue to inhabit it, speaking a language that is not French, living in villages with Occitan names, beneath the castles that were built to exert dominance over them, erecting monuments in the language of their ancestors to name what was done to them 700 years after the fact, because no one else was going to do it. In places like Béziers, Minerve, Montségur, and others marked by historical violence and trauma, you may not necessarily feel the presence of a specific ghost or a specific supernatural charge. Sometimes the feeling is considerably more difficult to describe. A hauntological landscape is haunted less by the supernatural than by memory, a place that persists in remembering a past that the rest of the world has collectively agreed to forget. That is what makes Cathar country one of the most quietly extraordinary regions in Europe. The Crusade ended in 1229, but the lingering traces of Catharism and its influence on medieval France, of a Cathar past that was prematurely stamped out, of a Cathar future that might have been, those traces linger like ghosts, haunting the cultural and imaginative landscape of the Languedoc to this day.
Let's read a scary Reddit story. I decided to read a story that takes place in Louisiana because that's my home state and Louisiana is haunted as fuck. This story is a little different from other ghost stories I've read. that take place in Louisiana, and I'm excited for you to see why. This story's a long one, so get comfortable and get ready. My family owns property in Kisatchie National Forest. This property consists of 55 acres of dense forest and a small house. My family has owned the property for a little under a decade, and no one lives out there. My family bought it for an occasional getaway and for emergencies. My grandparents and both my uncles would always tell us stories of hearing strange sounds at night, something beating on tree trunks with sticks, and they would apparently hear something knock up against the house from time to time. They would also hear whistles at night, and they would find broken tree limbs set up in weird ways, almost like some kind of fence or barricade towards the back of our property. My grandpa, trying not to sound crazy, said he thought it was essentially a North American primate that hadn't been officially acknowledged by the scientific community. In April of this year, my wife and I decided to go stay out there for a couple of months, just to get away from the distractions of being in your early 20s and living in the city. On our first night there, we started experiencing all of the same stuff my family described. Weird noises, knocks, whistles, and always feeling like you're being watched. We would have fires right by the tree line at night and have a few drinks, and we would hear something that sounded like it had 2 legs and was big, just inside the tree line where you couldn't see it. It would just sit there, or it would walk back and forth inside the tree line and watch us. Whatever it was probably curious, because there hadn't been any human activity whatsoever on our property in over a year, until my wife and I came along. The same stuff would happen over and over again for about a month and a half. Mainly just hearing weird noises as soon as the sun went down and until the sun came back up, every night. Then, my wife and I actually saw something one night. It was around 10 p.m. and we were outside in front of the house. Behind the house is where the forest is. I was on the phone with the internet people because our internet was down, when me and my wife heard something that sounded like a coyote howl coming from the small field that separates our house and the forest. It was less than 100 yards away, but my house lights don't reach that far. Therefore, we couldn't see what it was. Almost at the same time, we heard a second sound. This was more of a high-pitched chuckle. It came from the same direction. We thought that whatever it was, there had to be more than one of them. About 5 minutes passed and we don't think anything of it. I thought it was just coyotes. But to the left of my house, about 30 to 40 yards away, is my neighbor's stable where all of their livestock hang out. I think it's important to note that my neighbors had just bought all of those animals, except for the dogs and horses, within 2 weeks prior of this event. The livestock was a new addition to my neighbor's property. I noticed that the mama cow was getting pissed about something, and she was looking at something in the dark that my wife and I couldn't see. The mama cow actually stepped on one of her calves by accident, trying to get in between them and whatever it was that was spooking her. A few seconds later, she charges at whatever it was, and me and my wife were finally able to make out the animal in the darkness. At first, it was on all fours, or kind of squatting down, and when the cow charged at it, it stood up on 2 legs and ran away. It was black or dark brown and was around 7 feet tall. One weird thing is, when it ran away, it made no sound whatsoever. And all of this happened only 30 to 40 yards away from where me and my wife were standing. Another weird thing is that my neighbor's dogs roam freely at all times, and they would bark at everything. But for some reason, when this happened, those dogs were nowhere to be found. Almost like they didn't want any part in whatever it was that we saw. So what I heard sounded like coyotes, but what I saw looked like a bear. The only thing is that bears don't make those kinds of sounds, and they also don't run from a threat on their hind legs. I don't know for sure what it was. After my wife and I finally saw whatever had been making all of those weird noises every night, my wife was so freaked out that we packed our stuff and moved back to Houston a few days later. I tried to argue against it because I enjoyed being out there despite the unusual stuff that happened. But she couldn't handle being out there any longer, and when the night came around, she would always be super anxious. I thought it was pretty unlikely that Bigfoot exists, but there is something out there. All I know is it wasn't any animal known for living in Kisatchie National Forest. I was born and raised in Houston, but I spent a lot of time hunting, and I lived in Colorado for a year and hiked the mountains almost every weekend. I'd say I'm pretty accustomed to being outdoors and identifying common animals by sound and sight. I also never really believed in Bigfoot before this. This is just a reminder that there are things in our parks and national forests that are unexplained, and there are things we have yet to discover. If you ever go out into the wilderness, no matter what the situation is, and no matter who you are with, always be prepared. This story is super interesting to me because I've never heard Any Bigfoot stories or Bigfoot encounters in Louisiana? I have heard of the Dogman and I've heard of the Rougarou, but this sounds like something a little bit different. What do you think this man saw? And have you ever seen Bigfoot in Louisiana?
Ballerina in a box. When I was much younger, I knew a girl whose only dream was to be a ballerina. So she practiced every morning, every evening, stretching and leaping and just flowing around the room. And she always danced to the exact same tune that came from a little music box that she carried with her. You know, inside the box had another little tiny ballerina that danced along with the girl whenever the song played. That damn box. I hated it, the way that it always seemed to push her too hard. I would watch her sometimes when she came over to my house after school. The girl and I were neighbors and friends, and she'd invite me to dance with her, but I was too nervous, too aware of the clumsy geometry of my steps. But when she danced, it was like she was running. Whether she was chasing after something or being chased, I never found out. When we were in high school, she danced in the auditorium. It was like a talent show, and she was perfect that night. I mean, the ebb and flow of her, the shadow just swept the stage clean. Like, it was a mad miracle. I mean, I don't know how her body held together the heat of her, this graceful friction. I mean, everyone in the room just held one shared breath. And then someone sped up her music. A practical joke at her expense, I guess. But for a while, somehow she kept up with it, just faster and faster, when lashing off of her as she raced after the song. And for a moment, it seemed like she might catch it. Then a stumble, a very human fall, and the spell was broken. People laughed to, I guess, relieve the tension. I did it, though, you know, it must have hurt, all the cackles. After that day, she was different. She became obsessed with perfection, so she spent every waking moment practicing. So I saw her less and less, and when I did, she was dancing, chasing the song from her music box, or being chased by it. You know, a human body can survive 3 weeks without food. She only made it 16 days. Oh, the dancing just burned her away early. So many of the same people that laughed at her fall cried at her funeral. I mean, I didn't. I was too numb, but at least she could rest in death finally. Or so I thought. So last night, the tears finally came and I decided to visit her grave. And when I arrived, I could hear a faint sound drifting up from the fresh earth. 2 sounds, actually. The first was the muted rasp of the music box. The second was the slow, clumsy thump of something buried trying to turn.
There have been moments where you're sitting there in your living room, a full-fledged adult, and wonder why is it that you're still scared of the dark, you're still scared of sleeping by yourself, you're still scared of being alone altogether. And then one day, you ask your mom that question and she tells you something you can't remember but did happen to you. Anyways, I'll be changing people's names for privacy reasons. Let's get into it. States that he always had been afraid of sleeping by himself. He never understood why. He's a grown adult. He should be getting over it. He shouldn't have to sleep with a nightlight. He shouldn't have to sleep with the light on in the hallway. He should be able to sleep with the doors closed in the dark with no issues. But he never could. It was like he had a feeling that something really bad happened to him, but he just couldn't recall when, where, and how it happened. Adam decided, like any young adult wanting to know about their childhood, their past, ask your parents, right? So that's what he did. He asked his mother what had happened to him when he was younger. Are there any traumatic events? And that's when his mom just looked at him. You remember? Mom states to Adam that everything changed after they bought the monkey from the garage sale down the street from their house. She said that at first it was little things where Adam would complain that there's someone walking in his room when he was 6, and then it would get gradually worse where he would say there's somebody at his foot of his bed, that someone's pulling his feet, that someone's laughing in the room, and that he needs them to stop because he needs to go to sleep. Now, Adam kept dismissing it as his imaginary friend didn't know how to stay still in the middle of the night and all he wants to do is play. However, Adam's mom, who was in the next room, could hear someone playing, someone laughing, someone running around in the room. And when she would walk into the room, she would see that Adam is in his bed, tucked like she left him, and there was nobody else in the room. So she knew there was something wrong. But Adam really didn't complain about it as severely as she would be woken up every night hearing it from the next room. Adam's mom for not dismissing her child's feelings because she took matters into her own hands and went to find out what was going on. And that's when they told her, a good friend of hers suggested for her to go see a psychic to see what was going on. His mom states that the only thing she regrets about this whole situation in his past was that she didn't move a little faster. Now, to me, I feel like she did a great job, but this is what she states. She states that it started escalating as if this thing knew she was trying to get rid of it. And it started scratching Adam at night, tormenting him. And it got to a point that Adam said he didn't want to be friends with whatever this was. Now, Adam used to call his friend him. Now, if you guys are like me and are from the 90s and early 2000s, child, you guys remember from Powerpuff Girls, him. Well, his mom describes him just like the Powerpuff Girls him from the show, which to me is completely creepy, but that's what Adam basically described him as to her. And he would not sleep in his room by himself anymore after that. After it had revealed his true identity, I guess, she says that he would not sleep in the room by himself. He refused. And then he asked her, well, what made me forget what had happened when I was in my childhood? And she said that something that the psychic did to him while they were in a session, because she requested from the psychic if there was any way to erase his memory. Now, was the psychic have abilities to like erase his memory? I don't know. I've never heard of a psychic being able to erase somebody's memory or make him push it back into his memory where he can't really recall it. Pretty to me, which is pretty cool, to be honest, thinking about it. But she says that that's what they did and he completely forgot about him. So what do you guys think that was? And
Imagine trying to protect a child from the monster under his bed, only for it to come after you instead. Let me read you a story. I used to work at a residential home for kids with behavioral disorders. It was a huge 150-year-old Victorian home that had been used since the 1960s as a home for troubled children. The center had a dark past, but was truly a great place by the time I started working there in 2009, as I completed my master's in psychology. Most of the kids had a combination of severe trauma and mental illness/behavioral disorders. I usually worked during the day, but occasionally did the night shift and would have to do bed checks every 15 minutes. I noticed that I would always find this one kid asleep on the floor, sometimes mostly under the bed. I would put him back in bed and then come back to find him back on the floor. I assumed this was a trauma behavior. He had a ton of childhood trauma and often did odd things. I kept quiet about it, not wanting to make him feel bad, until one night I swore that it looked like he was being dragged out of the bed and pulled halfway under. He was on heavy meds and it seemed like he was asleep. When I went in to put him back in bed, the hair on the back of my neck was raised and I ended up basically dragging him off the floor when he wouldn't immediately get up because I was so unexplainably freaked out. Still not really suspecting anything too weird, this kid was an oddball by nature and was constantly doing stuff like this. I decided to ask him about it since I was getting tired of lifting this kid who weighed more than me off the floor every night. The next day I asked him casually why he kept sleeping on the floor, and in no way did I suggest or even suspect anything paranormal at that point. He got this really weird, scared look in his eyes, then casually said, "Oh, that's the dark thing. It lives under my bed." At this point, I'm still thinking that this was some kind of coded expression of trauma, but not wanting to discount his experience, I said, "Well, that won't do. Let's get rid of it." I had a ritual I would do to remove monsters from closets that involved struggling with the pretend monster and then booting it out of the door and telling it not to come back, and he knew this. He got very serious and said, "I don't think what you do is going to work. You should say some prayers or something too." This kid had an IQ of 50, had never seen any movies rated over PG, and this comment just was so strange. But wanting him to really believe that it was gone, I went and grabbed a copy of the House Bible and a salt shaker, and we said a couple of Our Fathers and a banishment prayer I found online and sprinkled salt around the bed. I then did my routine of struggling with the monster and opened the window and kicked it out. The kid visibly brightened and said, "He's gone." I went home having completely forgotten about the banishment and went to bed. I was awakened around 3 a.m. to the sound of my cat hissing next to me. I tried to sit up but could not, and felt what could only be described as claws in my hair, and my head was being forced behind the bed between the mattress and the headboard. I was super confused and disoriented, but then it dawned on me. Maybe it's the dark thing. I blurted out another "Our Father," and all of a sudden, my cat started violently swatting my head where I could feel the claws. There was a burst of bright light, and I could feel the claws release, and my cat calm down again. I have sleep paralysis and have always written this story off as just another weird sleep paralysis event, but I have never fully shaken this cold feeling I had that night, that something hated me and wanted to destroy me. The kid was never found on the floor again, by the way. So, do you think this was just sleep paralysis, or did something actually follow her home? Let me know.
So I used to love going thrifting, right? That was like my go-to thing, to go to like the higher end thrift stores. And I was on a mission to go find 2 picture frames for my kids' school pictures. So I remember getting to a thrift store and I find them. To a thrift store and I find the 2 picture frames. And the border is like really nice. And it has like some, I don't remember what it was. I think it was like some flowers or something. You could tell that it was just used for like decorative purposes. When I get home and I pull out the back of those frames, there's 2 pictures in them. One frame has this picture. You could tell there's 2 couples there. And it says Claudia, and I can't read the guy's name, Lalonde and friends. And it says Wednesday, 1902. Okay, there's this one. And in the other frame, this is the same woman that right here, but now she has, I'm assuming those are all her kids. And this one, I thought it had a little note on it, but I don't know what happened to it. Oh, it does. It has it in the front. It says Claudia Lalonde and family, 1922. Right here. And this one says 1902. And I tried looking this last name up. And I kid you not, it was like a couple years ago. I looked it up and it said like they were deceased, obviously, but it had like their tombstone. I just don't remember where exactly it was. Anyways, I'm gonna clip the pictures in here. But I don't know if her husband is just not there anymore, or he passed away, or she just wanted to take a picture with her kids. But isn't this kind of creepy? And I don't want to like throw it away because I feel guilty. Why do I feel guilty? I don't know. I don't know what to do with them. I've had these pictures like literally in the garage, and this one actually got damaged because it fell behind the washer. But I don't know what to do with them. I mean, do I just put them in another picture frame and then I'm like, why would somebody just put them in a picture frame but not even expose the picture? Do I just keep holding on to this? I'm telling you, I've had these picture frames already. Picture frames. Well, yeah, the picture frames. But I've had these pictures for like 5 years already. And like I said, I'm just like, I don't know. I just have them there. Or should I post them on Facebook and see if anybody recognizes like their own family? I'm assuming they're like great grandparents. I don't know. I just thought I'd share that with you guys because I think this is another reason why I always hear creepy stuff in my house, because I used to thrift so many things and I know that spirits can be attached to stuff.
You're at a pub with your partner and your pint, which is sat on the table, just flies off in front of both of you. No one's come over to you, no one's even bloody moved. What are you going to do? Tonight's ghost story is called George at the Black Horse and it's been sent to us by Andy, so a massive thank you, Andy. Let's read it. He says, "Hello, I had a strange thing happen in a pub called the Black Horse in Nettleham in Lincolnshire. My full pint of real ale was thrown off the table in front of my eyes and several other people. A lady very quickly came up to me and said, 'Sorry, that's George. He always picks on a man with a real ale.' So she got me another pint. He says, people screamed. I don't blame them, but I was calm, and so was my wife. I checked the very heavy table and the walls for any sign of trickery, but nothing was out of place. Ooh. When I left, I was taken over by an aggressive mood, falling out with my wife because I mentioned a lovely cottage in the village that was for sale when she said I would never be able to afford it, and I felt very offended. We went to a fuel station to fill the car because we were going on holiday the next morning to Dorset. Big up Dorset. My favourite place, and I don't blame you. Not that I'm biased. So I would normally have been happy and singing, but this spirit insisted I would be angry and aggressive, even telling my wife I would drive her into a lamppost. He's put crazy, I know. The whole night I wasn't myself, and then by 6 a.m. I felt something lift, and I was very tired, but I got on with loading the car. By some chance, sometime later, I was in the pub and told some people about the event. A lady said she had worked at the Black Horse for 14 years and that the spirit was George, a man that died at the table from a heart attack. Wow. What are you meant to do with that? Not only have you seen it, your wife's seen it, everyone in the pub who was watching saw it. How do you explain that? I mean, for him, it's good that he checked everything. He obviously wanted to make sure that there was nothing afoot, like people weren't trying to trick him or just play a prank on him. And I think you would be like that, wouldn't you? Be like, hang on a minute, things don't just fire off tables, or at least every day they don't, and not in front of everyone. What do you make of this story? Let me know in the comments. And if you've got a story like this, email me, thedarklyncchronicles25@gmail.com. I would love to speak to you. I'll catch you guys in the next one.
This story comes from viewer Movie Woof, woof like a dog, and it's a little concerning. I'm just going to jump straight into it. It was titled Terrifying Black Mass. We have a newborn baby, and with the temperature being so high as of late, we have been trying our best to keep the bedroom temperature as low as we feasibly can. A few nights ago, it was especially warm. Baby was in bed, wife was asleep, and even our boy had decided to jump into our bed to help intensify the collective body heat. Being the ever-considerate father, and with the appeal of getting a peaceful night's sleep, I decided to sleep on the couch. All was good at first. I was just having a dream. I can't even recall what the dream was about, but what I do remember is the giant black mass that approached me in the dream. It terrified me enough to wake me up. What made it all the more terrifying is that when I woke up, this same black mass was standing over me right beside the couch. I'm not usually prone to outburst, but I very much let slip a terrified, audible yell. Luckily, somehow not loud enough to disturb the family, but loud enough that I knew I was definitely fully awake. Whatever this dark mass was, it quickly shuffled away towards the hall, and I know there will be some who might say this was all just in my head because I had just woke up. But as it was fleeing down the hallway, it knocked over one of our kids' toys, a tangible clue that I had been very much awake. It vanished. I got up for a little bit, went to the bathroom, and sat up for a bit before drifting off again. While terrified when this mass was beside me, there was an eerie calm when it had gone. No fear, just a brief solemn moment. I don't know what it was. However, when my boy was little, he would talk about this shadow that would try and get him. It was this same shadow that started his sleeping in our bed. It was just one shadow that would try to get him. There were others who were protecting him. There were also footsteps being heard by both me and the wife, along with objects disappearing and turning up again in odd places. And I've been curious if something creepy was going to make a comeback with our new little one. With our boy, it started out with small things. I was putting him to bed one night and had to make a pit stop to the bathroom. As I headed back to his room, he was giggling and chatting with someone. He was only about 2 years old at this time. When I asked him who he was talking to, He would point to the corner and say them, never him or her, always them. There would be small toys of his that would vanish. We would search the house high and low with no luck. Then weeks later, it would just be arbitrarily sitting in the middle of the floor, couch, or bed. If it happens once, that's fine. Twice is a bit weird, but by the third and fourth time, it has become an odd pattern. The wife was the first to hear the footsteps. We live in a bungalow, so it's a small space. There are 2 halls leading from the living room and sitting room, one that leads to the bedrooms and the other to the bathroom and kitchen. The wife was in bed when she heard the footsteps walking towards the bedroom. She thought it was me passing through to bed, but it wasn't me. I never came through. I heard them from in the other hall on a different night. This area is a short 5-foot space, and these were heavy footsteps. I jumped when I heard them. But the dog, who is sadly no longer with us, didn't react, so I thought nothing more of it until it happened again minutes later. It wasn't so much a fear feeling as just a creepy WTF was that kind of thing. And yet again, nothing from the dog. The big one was after we had put the boy and ourselves to bed. He had his own room and we had ours, and he was still around 2 at this time. We were startled awake by him screaming his head off. The wife rushed through the house to discover him sitting in the middle of the floor screaming. She picks him up and relocates him to our bed, and he quickly goes back to sleep. It's not until morning that we find out he is struggling to stand and walk. After a trip to the hospital, we discover he has an inner ear infection causing his balance to be off and vertigo. So we figured that was the reason for the screaming, the fact he couldn't walk. It's not until we get him back home when we ask him about it again, and not being able to walk wasn't the reason for his crying at all. He says it was the shadows. The shadows were trying to get me. Obviously, this makes us a little concerned, so we pursue it a little more. That's when he clarified there were multiple shadows, but only one of them were after him. The rest were all just standing over him. We assumed protecting him, but a few days later he said he preferred to sleep in our bedroom because the shadows don't go in there. I should specify that both of these bedrooms are identical and straight across the hall from one another. And we stay in a quiet, out-of-the-way area where the same amount of outside light comes into both rooms. I've had a few other paranormal experiences throughout my life before we moved here, but I'll save those stories for another time. So if you want another couple of stories not as creepy, I'm happy to share. Sorry for the long story. No, thanks. Never apologize for a long story. The more detail, the better. I love it. Anyway, thank you, Movie Wolf. Great story. We will be sending our prayers and positive vibes your way. That definitely sounds like a dark entity. Not something I really want to be hanging around in my living room. So yeah, we will be sending our prayers and positive vibes your way. Thank you again for your story. Keep sending me those stories and suggestions, guys. And keep Appalachia haunted, y'all.
I seen a mermaid in Lake Michigan when I was 8 or 9 years old. When I was a child, I used to go to Lake Michigan constantly with my dad and my brother. Now my little ass always forgot to bring my goggles. My brother and I used to always go under the water and we'd have our goggles and we would look at each other down in the water. We'd be trying to sit at the bottom and shit. So I notoriously forgot my goggles again. And I went down in the water and opened my eyes. Now from first glance, I seen this thing like in the distance under the water. And it looked like a fucking octopus. I'm like, there's no fucking way there's an octopus in this motherfucker. You know, in my mind. So I kind of went back up again, took a breath, went back down and looked. Immediately went back down. And that's when I realized it wasn't a fucking octopus. Now by octopus, I mean that it looked like Ursula from The Little Mermaid. Now this time I could see it a little bit clearer, but it was still blurry because it hurts your eyes to look underwater, especially how filthy the lake is. And I could see it, I could see the tail. It looked blackish, purplish. It looked really dirty, like a fish that had been under the water, like algae and shit on it. You know what I'm saying? And I didn't really see the top half because it was swimming away when I put my head back down. But I seen the tail slithering away, and I seen the torso of a person. I seen human looking flesh, but it was very light colored. It was like a person that had not been in the sun, and they were super pale. I couldn't see the face. Now it looked almost like it had hair that was kind of like swishing away, but it was really dark and black and dirty looking. Now I can say that it closely resembled seaweed, but it was not like that. It was like hair, but it was just dark black. At the time, I was in the midst of just having fun with my brother and like just going under the water, so it didn't really process to me in that moment what I had seen. It actually isn't until a few years later when I got to be 12, 13, and I was kind of thinking about the experience, and I realized that what I had seen was a mermaid. Now, when I was a child, I always liked the idea of mermaids and shit, but I never thought it was real. So in my mind, I was not like, oh, I just seen a mermaid. No, I thought I just seen some weird animal, some sort of creature. I really thought it was an octopus until I seen the half-human skin and the hair. Because at first, all I could see was the tail, which was the big purple blob fish looking thing. So yeah, that's my experience with seeing a mermaid in Lake Michigan. This story is 100% real. This is not a fake story. I still to this day cannot even fathom that I actually had seen something like that. Follow for more creepy shit.
Bro, what's going on around